Commander Jerk adjusted the straps of his exploration pack and stepped carefully over the jagged rocks of the purple desert. The sky above the frontier planet was streaked with strange colors, shifting in soft bands of pink and violet as twin suns settled closer to the horizon. Jerk had been sent ahead to survey this territory for potential human colonies. Reports had hinted at unusual energy readings, and his orders were clear: investigate and, if possible, recover anything valuable. The ground was hard, broken by deep fissures that seemed to run endlessly toward the mountains in the distance. Jerk's boots crunched over dust that sparkled faintly, like tiny fragments of crystal. He paused and scanned the horizon. The silence of the planet was almost unnatural. No wind, no movement, just the distant echo of shifting rock. He adjusted the visor on his helmet to enhance the thermal scans. Something moved. A shimmer, subtle but distinct, caught the corner of his eye. He turned sharply, hand on the grip of his plasma sidearm, though he had been instructed to avoid confrontation if possible. The shimmer solidified and he froze. A figure emerged from behind a rock formation, moving with fluid precision. Jerk's breath caught. The being was unlike anything he had ever seen. It was a woman, but not human. Her skin had a soft luminescence, faintly gold beneath the surface of what looked like living armor. The armor itself clung to her form as if grown from her body, moving slightly with her gestures, reflecting the fading light in shifting patterns. She was tall, elegant, with long limbs that seemed almost sculpted. Her eyes glowed faintly, and she studied him carefully, unafraid but cautious. Jerk stepped forward slowly. "I mean no harm," he said in a clear, firm voice, hoping that his universal translator would handle the alien tones. The woman's response was immediate. Before he could take another step, she reached out and grabbed his wrist. The armor covering her forearm was cool but surprisingly strong. Her grip was firm, unyielding, yet not violent. Jerk felt the pull of authority in her touch. "Only my husband may remove my armor," the translator device crackled, rendering her words into a form he could understand. Jerk froze. The sentence made no sense at first. Husband, armor, he took a cautious step back. "I'm not your, what do you mean?" He kept his voice calm. Any sudden movement could provoke a reaction. The woman's gaze did not waver. Her hand remained on his wrist, holding him in place. She tilted her head slightly, as if assessing him. Her eyes were sharp, intelligent, and wary. Jerk realized she was not threatening him. Yet. She was testing him. The translator beeped again. More words came, fragmented. The device struggled with the alien syntax, but he understood the essence. She was the last of her kind, and her armor was sacred. Only someone worthy, someone who understood and respected her, could ever remove it. Jerk considered this. He had trained for years for contact with alien species, but nothing had prepared him for this. He knew one thing for certain: this encounter could define the future of the colony and possibly the survival of her people. "All right," he said carefully. "I won't touch it, I promise. I just need to know, are you alone?" The woman studied him for a long moment. Her eyes softened just slightly, and she released his wrist, though her hands hovered near him, ready to react. The translator rendered another fragment. "Alone, survivor. Vraxel destroyed my people, must protect myself, must protect the knowledge." Jerk's heart tightened. The Vraxel, reports from other scouts had warned of this warlike species, aggressive and relentless. Their attacks had wiped out entire settlements and research teams before. He nodded slowly. "I understand. I can help you if you let me." The woman's eyes flicked toward the horizon, then back at him. The translator spoke again, slower this time. "Trust not given lightly. Words are empty. Actions must prove." Jerk felt the weight of those words. She demanded more than just promises. She demanded courage, understanding, and respect. "I'll prove myself," he said simply. "I will not harm you. I will help you survive." The alien woman's armor shifted subtly, almost like a ripple of acknowledgement. She stepped aside, allowing him to move past the rocky formation toward a small plateau. The terrain was treacherous, but she moved with ease, leading him silently. Jerk followed, every sense alert. As they walked, he noticed more details. Her armor wasn't just protective, it seemed to respond to her thoughts. Small panels shifted, sealing or opening to regulate temperature or adjust flexibility. It hummed softly, like a living organism. The way she moved in it, so confident, made it clear that any attempt to remove it without consent would be catastrophic. They reached the plateau. From here, Jerk could see an abandoned settlement partially buried in the sand. Broken structures, once elegant, now lay in ruin. Some had collapsed entirely, leaving twisted metal and stone scattered across the dunes. There was evidence of a battle, scorched areas, deep gouges in the ground, and signs of hurried retreat. "She was here," Jerk murmured, more to himself than to her. The woman turned, her glowing eyes meeting his. The translator rendered, "Was here before Vraxel came. Knowledge hidden must survive." Jerk nodded. "We need to find it. Whatever knowledge survived, it's important, not just for you, for all of humanity." She regarded him silently. Then, with a fluid motion, she signaled toward a narrow canyon leading away from the plateau. Jerk understood that she wanted him to follow. He did, carefully, watching every movement, listening to every subtle sound. The planet seemed alive in its silence, the shifting of sand, the faint hum of the armor, the distant groan of rocks settling. As they entered the canyon, a sudden wind kicked up. Dust swirled around them, and Jerk shielded his eyes. When it settled, he realized he had almost missed the subtle glow of a structure partially hidden behind a rock face. It pulsed faintly, like the heartbeat of some alien life. "That's it," he whispered. The woman's eyes narrowed, alert. She reached out and placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. The translator spoke. "Approach carefully, knowledge protected, danger not visible." Jerk swallowed hard. He knew they were not alone. The Vraxel could arrive at any moment. Yet he felt an unspoken trust forming between him and this alien woman. She had chosen to guide him, even as she remained cautious. He moved forward slowly, studying the structure. It was not just a building, it was a repository. Strange symbols glowed along the walls, patterns that seemed to shift and change when observed from different angles. Jerk felt a thrill of excitement. Human science had never encountered anything like this. The possibilities were staggering. But before he could take another step, the ground shook slightly. Dust fell from the canyon walls, and Jerk caught a faint vibration under his boots. The woman stiffened, eyes scanning every shadow. The translator rendered, "Vraxel nearby, must hide." Jerk's pulse quickened. He ducked behind a rock as she moved beside him, her armor glinting faintly. They were small targets against the canyon walls, but the sense of urgency was clear. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Time seemed distorted in the canyon. Jerk barely breathed, listening to the silence. Then a faint echo came from deeper within the canyon. The Vraxel were approaching. He could feel it before he heard it. The low rumble of their machinery, the unnatural hiss of their movement across the rocks. The alien woman looked at him, her eyes glowing brighter. The translator said simply, "Must act, must survive." Jerk nodded. He knew they would have to move fast. There was no choice. He took a deep breath, preparing for what came next, aware that this first encounter could define everything that followed. The bond between them was fragile but forming. Trust had begun, and with it, the possibility of cooperation, survival, and perhaps something more. As the shadow of the Vraxel approached, Jerk realized that nothing in his training had prepared him for this. An alien survivor, a sacred armor, and a test of courage and respect unlike anything humanity had faced. Yet he felt ready. He would not fail. He would not betray the trust of the woman who had, against all odds, chosen to guide him. And he knew that the moment had come where actions would speak louder than words, where survival and understanding would intertwine, and where the first chapter of a story far greater than either of them had begun. Jerk moved carefully through the canyon, following the alien woman who led him with quiet confidence. The Vraxel were still out there, their distant rumble a constant reminder that danger was never far. Each step had to be deliberate. The rocky terrain was treacherous, jagged stones cutting through the soles of his boots despite the protective soles of his suit. Yet he found himself strangely calm. Lyra, the alien woman, moved with grace, her living armor shifting with every motion, flowing almost like liquid metal over her form. He had learned her name after several attempts with the translator. It was difficult for his device to capture the correct sound, but it rendered her name as Lyra. There was a subtle authority in the way she moved, an unspoken expectation that he follow and observe carefully. They reached a narrow ledge that overlooked a valley filled with ruins of her civilization. Massive spires of crystal and metal jutted from the ground, some glowing faintly with the same energy signature that hummed in her armor. The scale of destruction was staggering. Lyra's people had clearly been highly advanced, yet now all that remained were remnants. The Vraxel had been thorough, leaving almost nothing intact. Jerk swallowed, trying to suppress the emotion rising within him. He had seen war and destruction before, but this was different. This was personal. This was a culture erased. And Lyra, the last of her kind, had survived against impossible odds. He felt a sense of awe and responsibility. Lyra paused at the edge of the ledge, her glowing eyes scanning the ruins. The translator rendered her fragmented words. Memory, protected, must not fall to Vraxel. Knowledge lost, if fail, lost forever. Jerk nodded. We won't fail, I promise. Whatever you need, I'll help protect it. She turned toward him, her eyes narrowing slightly. There was an intensity in her gaze that made him acutely aware of the trust she had yet to fully extend. She lifted a hand, palm outward, and the translator crackled. Words meaningless. Action proves worth. Jerk understood. Trust had to be earned. Respect had to be shown through deeds, not promises. He steeled himself. Lyra led him down into the valley, keeping to the shadows of the broken structures. The energy readings he had detected earlier were growing stronger. It was coming from what looked like a central tower, partially collapsed but still intact. The walls were lined with intricate patterns, glowing faintly with alien energy. Jerk felt a thrill of discovery. Whatever was stored here could change humanity's understanding of science, technology, and interstellar strategy. But there was no time for wonder. The faint vibrations in the ground reminded him that the Vraxel were approaching. Lyra moved with purpose, guiding him through narrow passages and collapsed corridors. He noticed that her armor seemed to respond to the environment, shifting panels to shield her from debris, adjusting its density to absorb impacts. She was a living weapon and protector, and yet she exuded a sense of calm, almost serenity, that made him feel safer than he had expected. They reached a large chamber. Broken consoles and scattered devices lay strewn across the floor. Strange symbols glowed faintly on the walls, shifting and rearranging themselves as if alive. Lyra approached one of the consoles and extended her hands. Her armor opened slightly at the wrists, revealing delicate structures beneath. The glow from the console reflected in her eyes. Memory core, she said, and the translator converted it. Contains knowledge of people, history, technology, must be secured. Jerk stepped closer. I can help, show me what to do. Lyra's gaze flicked toward him. For a moment he thought she would refuse, but then she extended a hand toward the core and the translator rendered. Only together, must understand, must respect. Only then can it be accessed. They worked side by side. Lyra guided his hands, showing him how to interact with the devices without triggering defensive protocols. Each movement required patience, precision, and understanding. Jerk realized that her armor, her people, and the core were all connected. She was not just protecting herself, she was protecting the legacy of her civilization. Hours passed. The sun shifted lower in the sky, casting long shadows across the valley. The Vraxel were closing in, but Lyra remained focused, teaching Jerk the subtle rhythms of her technology. Slowly, he began to understand. The core responded not just to touch, but to intent. It recognized respect, patience, and clarity of mind. When he approached a sensitive panel with the wrong intent, the core shivered and shut down. When he tried again with care and focus, it glowed brighter. Lyra watched silently, her eyes glowing softly. At one point, she reached out and touched his shoulder. The translator crackled, Patience, awareness, courage, these are needed. Will you prove them? Jerk nodded without hesitation. Yes, whatever it takes. She allowed him to proceed. Together, they unlocked the first layer of the memory core. Images and recordings flickered to life around them, holographic projections of Lyra's people. He saw their cities, their daily lives, their celebrations, and their discoveries. Jerk felt a deep sadness. This was a civilization lost to violence, yet preserved in fragments of light and energy. Beautiful, he whispered. They were extraordinary. Lyra's eyes softened slightly. The translator rendered, yes, extraordinary and gone, must survive, must protect, must continue. Suddenly a tremor shook the ground. Dust fell from the ceiling. The Vraxel were near. Jerk's heart pounded. He looked to Lyra. She remained calm, her eyes glowing brighter, her armor shifting in preparation. The translator said, Test must prove worth under threat, survival. The first Vraxel scouts appeared at the edge of the chamber. Their forms were dark, jagged, and terrifying. They moved with speed and precision, weapons raised. Jerk raised his sidearm instinctively, but Lyra placed a hand on his chest. The translator rendered, Patience. Strategy, coordination, only then survive. He nodded, lowering the weapon slightly. He trusted her. Together, they moved through the chamber, Lyra guiding him, using her knowledge of the terrain and technology to evade the Vraxel. She activated defensive protocols in her armor, sending energy pulses that created temporary shields and distractions. Jerk followed her lead, learning quickly to move not just with strength, but with precision and awareness. Hours felt like minutes. The battle of wits and agility tested both of them. The Vraxel were relentless, but Jerk and Lyra began to understand each other's rhythms. A subtle hand signal from her, a glance in his direction, a slight adjustment in movement, these were enough to coordinate perfectly. They were becoming a team. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, they reached a deeper chamber. Here, the core's defenses were more sensitive. Lyra gestured for Jerk to observe. "Focus," she said. "Intent must be pure, must respect memory, must respect people." Jerk took a deep breath. He placed his hands on the controls, mind focused not on the battle outside, but on understanding and preserving what lay before him. Lyra mirrored his movements, their energies almost syncing. Slowly, the next layer of the memory core unlocked. Holographic images expanded, showing not only history but technology, art, philosophy, and knowledge beyond humanity's comprehension. Jerk marveled. This could change everything. Lyra's eyes glowed faintly. Knowledge is power if respected, misused is destruction. The Vraxel pressed closer, their sounds echoing through the canyon, but Jerk and Lyra remained focused. They moved through the sequences together, unlocking and preserving each fragment, learning each other's methods, each other's signals. Trust was building, a fragile but growing bond. Finally, as the last layer of the core stabilized, Lyra stepped back. The translator rendered her words, "Proved worth, respect shown, courage demonstrated, knowledge safe for now." Jerk exhaled deeply, feeling a sense of relief and pride. They had survived the first test together, not by strength alone, but by patience, respect, and understanding. Lyra's gaze lingered on him, softer than before. The translator rendered, "Actions speak, words not enough." "You have begun to prove." Jerk nodded, realizing the depth of her meaning. Trust was not given lightly. Bonds were formed through shared effort, through facing danger and showing respect for what was sacred. He felt a connection to her, not romantic yet, but profound. They had begun a partnership, one that could bridge their species and perhaps save more than just themselves. As the sun dipped lower, casting long purple shadows across the valley, Jerk and Lyra prepared to leave the chamber. The Vraxel were still out there, but now they had a plan, and more importantly, they had each other. The first true bond had been formed, a bond that would be tested again and again, through trials, battles, and the challenges of survival on this harsh and alien world. Jerk understood that their journey had only just begun. The alien woman, the last of her kind, had chosen to share her trust in small steps, and he had taken the first. The path ahead was dangerous, uncertain, and full of possibilities, yet he felt ready. Together, they could face anything. And so, with careful steps and shared purpose, they moved deeper into the ruins, the glowing memory core lighting their way, and the distant rumble of the Vraxel serving as a constant reminder that survival required courage, wisdom, and a bond stronger than fear. Jerk and Lyra moved cautiously through the ruins, the glowing memory core behind them illuminating the path in a soft golden light. The air was tense, charged with the anticipation of conflict. Every shadow seemed like a potential threat. The distant rumble of the Vraxel had grown louder. Their scouts were no longer cautious. They were approaching in force, determined to claim the knowledge Lyra had preserved. Lyra's armor shifted with her movements, the living material flowing smoothly over her form. She paused at the edge of a collapsed structure and crouched slightly, scanning the terrain ahead. Her eyes glowed faintly, reflecting not just the light but her heightened awareness. Jerk followed her lead, lowering his body, careful not to make a sound. "They're close," Lyra said through the translator, her voice calm but firm. "Must move quickly, must survive, must protect knowledge." Jerk nodded. He understood the gravity of the situation. The memory core contained centuries of her people's knowledge, history, technology, and discoveries that humanity could not yet imagine. If the Vraxel took it, the consequences would be catastrophic. He drew his sidearm, checking the energy levels. Every shot counted. The Vraxel were ruthless, and they would not hesitate to destroy anything in their path. They reached a narrow canyon that led to a hidden valley. Lyra's eyes flicked to a small fissure in the rock wall. With a subtle gesture, she indicated the entrance. "This way." she said. Jerk followed, ducking through the narrow passage. The fissure opened into a hidden chamber shielded from the valley outside. It was small but secure, with walls of crystal and metal that hummed faintly with energy. Jerk exhaled. "We can hold them here for a while," he said. Lyra shook her head. "Not enough. Vraxel, relentless, must fight and act." Her gaze met his. The translator rendered, "Will you fight with me? Will you risk your life for knowledge, for trust?" Jerk's jaw tightened. "I will," he said firmly. "I will fight for you, for them, for this knowledge." Lyra nodded, her eyes reflecting a mixture of relief and determination. "Then prepare. Must combine strength and mind, strategy, not just force." The first Vraxel scouts appeared in the valley below. Dark, jagged shapes moved with unnatural speed, weapons raised. Their screeching war cries echoed through the canyon. Jerk's heart pounded, but he forced himself to stay calm. Lyra's presence was grounding, her confidence and control a shield against panic. "Cover me," she said, moving toward the center of the chamber. Energy pulses from her armor activated, forming a faint barrier around the entrance. The translator rendered, "Must protect core, must distract, must act together." Jerk positioned himself near the chamber's edge, aiming carefully. The first Vraxel scout entered the hidden chamber, unaware of their presence. Jerk fired, energy bolts striking true, disabling the scout without alerting the others. He exhaled, knowing the real battle was yet to come. Lyra's armor shifted, extending subtle energy tendrils that interfaced with the chamber's walls. The holographic symbols glowed brighter, responding to her presence. She whispered instructions to Jerk through the translator. "Use chamber, use knowledge, must confuse, must delay, must survive." Jerk understood. The chamber itself was a weapon if used correctly. He moved quickly, positioning debris and activating energy nodes with guidance from Lyra. The Vraxel entered in greater numbers now, their movements coordinated, but they had not anticipated the traps and diversions created by the chamber's energy. The battle escalated. Energy pulses clashed against alien weapons, sparks flying across the chamber. Jerk fired carefully, striking precise points to disable Vraxel machinery without harming the structure. Lyra moved with him, her armor flowing, guiding energy pulses to reinforce the defenses. At one point, a Vraxel leapt toward the core, its jagged claws aimed at the memory repository. Jerk reacted instantly, tackling it away from the structure. The creature screeched, thrashing violently, but Lyra's energy tendrils restrained it, immobilizing it without damage. Jerk realized the combination of human courage and Lyra's technology was more effective than either could manage alone. Hours passed in what felt like minutes. The battle tested every skill, every instinct, every ounce of courage. Jerk and Lyra moved as one, communicating through gestures and glances, their bond growing stronger with every coordinated action. They began to anticipate each other's movements, creating a rhythm that made their defense almost seamless. The Vraxel, realizing their initial assault was failing, unleashed a larger force, breaching the valley with armored vehicles and more scouts. Jerk felt a surge of adrenaline. He could not allow the core to fall. He looked at Lyra. Her eyes met his, glowing with determination. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. The translator rendered, "Now must trust fully, must act together." Jerk nodded. He stepped forward, joining her at the chamber's center. Lyra's armor responded, extending protective energy around both of them. She whispered guidance, "Combine, synchronize courage and mind together." He followed, their hands moving in coordination, activating energy nodes and focusing their intent on the core. The chamber responded, pulsing with protective energy. The Vraxel advanced, but each step forward was met with resistance. Energy fields flared, creating barriers and illusions that slowed their enemies. In the midst of the chaos, a Vraxel managed to breach the outer defenses. It leapt toward Lyra, claws aimed at her chest. Jerk reacted instantly, diving and grabbing the creature, wrestling it away. Lyra extended her energy tendrils, restraining it. The synchronization of their actions saved them both. As the Vraxel fell back, regrouping, Jerk realized that the final test was approaching. Lyra's armor shimmered, glowing brighter than ever. The translator rendered, "Trust complete. Armor may be removed if bond proven." Jerk froze, understanding the significance. The armor was not just protective, it was sacred, a symbol of trust and unity. Removing it required proof of courage, understanding, and respect. He looked at Lyra, seeing not just a warrior, but a being willing to share her trust with him. The Vraxel pressed again, stronger, more aggressive. Jerk and Lyra moved to the chamber's edge, using the energy pulses and holographic patterns to confuse and delay the enemy. The bond between them allowed seamless coordination, turning the tide. The Vraxel faltered, unsure how to penetrate the combined defenses. Finally, the main Vraxel leader appeared, larger and more terrifying than the others. Its weapon glowed with lethal energy aimed directly at the core. Jerk realized this was the critical moment. He had to act, and so did Lyra. They moved together, synchronizing their actions. Lyra activated the chamber's defensive protocols fully, creating a dome of energy around the core. Jerk positioned himself to intercept the Vraxel leader. The creature struck, but Lyra's energy tendrils and Jerk's precise attacks blocked and deflected. The battle reached a climax of speed, skill, and coordination. Finally, Jerk saw an opening. He acted instinctively, diving to redirect the Vraxel leader's energy away from the core. Lyra extended her tendrils, amplifying the energy, creating a feedback loop that overwhelmed the creature's systems. With a final screech, it fell, incapacitated but alive. Silence fell. The remaining Vraxel retreated, their assault broken. Jerk and Lyra stood amidst the ruins, breathing heavily but victorious. The chamber hummed softly, stabilizing. The memory core glowed, safe and intact. Lyra turned to Jerk. The translator rendered, "Courage proven, respect proven, bond proven. Armor may be removed if willing." Jerk felt the weight of the moment. This was not a simple gesture. It symbolized complete trust, the culmination of trials, battles, and shared experience. He nodded solemnly. "I am ready," he said, understanding the responsibility. Lyra stepped forward, allowing him to touch the armor. It felt alive beneath his hands, warm and responsive. Slowly, carefully, he began the process of removal, guided by her subtle movements and gestures. The armor shifted, separating from her body without harming her, revealing her true form. Lyra stood before him, elegant, radiant, and strong. Her skin glowed faintly with the energy of her people, her eyes reflecting relief, trust, and newfound connection. Jerk felt awe, respect, and something deeper. The bond they had forged in battle through trials and under pressure had reached its full expression. She looked at him, the translator rendering her words softly. "Trust given, bond shared, together we survive." Jerk nodded. "Yes, together we survive." The valley was quiet now, the Vraxel defeated for the moment. The knowledge of her people was safe. Their bond, tested through fire and conflict, had been proven. Together they had faced impossible odds and emerged stronger. As the suns dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the valley, Jerk and Lyra prepared for the next phase of their journey. The world was vast, full of dangers and discoveries, but they would face it together. Trust, respect, and courage had united human and alien, and nothing could break the bond formed through shared trials. The chapter of survival, courage, and alliance was complete, but the story of humanity, Lyra, and the legacy of her people was only beginning.